Hello and welcome to The Leading Question. I'm your host, Steve Wigrizer. Today's leading question: is it possible, given the history of the Middle East, both past and present, for children and young adults to have shared experiences? To help us answer that question today, we have Harvey Price, who is Executive Director of Peace Drums. And Harvey, you've been here before. I think it was almost 3 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. Longer than that. But for many of our viewers who may not remember that episode, could you familiarize our viewership with what you do?
Sure. Thanks, Steve, for having me. Peace Drums Project is entering our second decade of work, connecting children of Muslim, Christian, and Jewish faith in the Middle East. And the question of the Middle East and conflict, there are conflict zones all over the world where groups like Peace Drums work with children and adults to try to quell problems between populations. In Israel alone, in the Middle East alone, there's over 100 organizations like Peace Drums that operate in Israel and the West Bank and Gaza to try to mitigate the problems that violence and conflict stir up. So we're one of many. We are somewhat unique in that we use music for our purposes, particularly the steel drums, which we decided to use almost 12 years ago when we started this project. And it is possible to get people together from that live in conflict zones that normally wouldn't think about the other as an ally or as a friend or even a colleague. And as I said, we're not unique, but we're unique in that we've been doing this now for 12 years, and for sure it's possible. We have 150 students every week that are participating in our steel bands and our musical ensembles that are learning about one another, regardless of what the political and the conflict and the war situation is there.
Right. This project is, for the most part, your brainchild, going back more than a decade. I think many of our viewers who may not have seen your first appearance on the show or are not familiar with the organization want to get some idea as to the genesis of this wonderful organization. So take us back 12 years, 13 years, and tell us how you got started.
Well, I'll take it back more than 20 years when the idea of using music as a conflict resolution idea first came into my consciousness during the first Iraq war that the United States was involved with. The State Department issued a grant calling for projects that use conflict resolution through the arts. And I never even thought about that. I was teaching at the University of Delaware percussion. I'm a full-time performing musician, and it just kind of hit me out of the blue, like I follow the world, I follow conflicts. I certainly follow the conflicts in the Middle East, and maybe I can do something. I can put two loves together: love of teaching, love of music, and to help people. So that was more than 20 years ago. I wrote a grant which wasn't successful, but it did plant the seed of I would like to do something in Israel to kind of mitigate the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through music. And it seems very simple, and some people say very pedantic, but if you work with young enough people, you get them before their ideas are formed against another group on either side of the conflict. So that's really where it got started. And then there was a group in Wilmington, Delaware called Delaware Churches for Mideast Peace. They wanted to do a project in Israel to kind of mitigate the situation there. This was as far back as 2012. And somebody knew of my ideas of using music for conflict resolution. So they asked me to come in and pitch this idea. And the idea was to use the steel band, because the steel drums come from Trinidad. They have no cultural relevance in the Middle East at all. They don't belong to the Arab population, the Jewish population, the Muslim population, the Christian population. They're the Jewish population. They're completely foreign to that. So I use that as so that whenever you introduce anything cultural, and it belongs to another group, then the group that doesn't know about it thinks, oh, we're learning X music as opposed to learning our music.
They're culturally neutral.
They're culturally neutral. The music they play is not, but by the time they wind up playing music together, if the Jewish kids learn Arabic music and the Arab kids learn Jewish music, they're already playing Caribbean music together. They're open to learning all types of music.
So this idea was supported by at least the group that you mentioned.
Delaware Churches for Mideast Peace was a multi-denominational group. It had rabbis, imams, priests, clergy, Protestant clergy, and the first thing they did was, they wanted to know how much this cost. And I said, well, it's going to cost $40,000 to buy a set of steel drums, purchase it from Trinidad, ship it to the U.S., put it on a plane, fly to the Middle East, put it in get it through customs, put it in a truck, and take it to a school.
How did you know that? Had you had experience with steel drums?
I had been teaching steel drums at the University of Delaware since the early 1990s, and had purchased drums for not only my own students but for schools in Delaware, in the Delaware public school system. So I knew what that was about, and then it was like, okay, how am I going to get these drums to Israel? You can't put them on a boat, right, because it would take too long, and who knows where they would wind up. So the easiest way was to put them on a plane. And at that time, US Air had a direct flight from Philly to Tel Aviv. So I went to the airport and I made friends with the ramp managers, and I said, I want to bring 50 cases of steel drums, and I would bring them to the airport, and they'd say, what is that? And, you're talking about a 55-gallon oil drum. And they said, we can help you with this. And they were amazing. And when US Air was taken over by American Airlines, they stopped that route, that direct route, which was really a drag. So now when I take steel drums there, I have to go to JFK and fly it.
You have to fly them.
And I fly them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where did the project start in Israel, and who were the initial participants? And take us through the progression up until the present time.
So the initial participants are now young people in their early 20s. And they were a school in an Arab village in Israel called Ibilin, and a school in a Jewish school in Haifa, which is a fairly mixed city, Arab and Jewish. And there were 10 each from each one of those schools, and we put a steel band in each school. And then they would rehearse separately with the same teacher, and then they would get together once or twice a month and rehearse. And they rehearse separately because the schools are segregated. It's a problem in Israel that there are Arab schools and Jewish schools, and the curriculum they have in the Ministry of Education. There's the head of Arab schools and the head of Jewish schools. So when you're doing a project with Arab and Jewish kids, you have to do something that's outside of the school curriculum. Even though the band, we put the drums in schools because it was the easiest place to have them, and the kids were right there, but they're not part of the school's curriculum at all.
Okay, so the schools didn't interact.
The schools didn't interact. The kids did.
Did the kids interact before peace drums?
No. In fact, no, they didn't. And there's very little interaction between Jewish and Arab youth in Israel pretty much until they get to college. And when they get to college, you have to understand the Jewish kids are coming after 3 or 4 years in military service. The Arab kids are graduate students by that time already. So to get kids as young as 10 years old together from the Arab and Jewish community is a major coup as far as I'm concerned, because now you're educating kids before they have time to sort of get all this negative information from outside.
All right, so what was the secret sauce? And you're a Philadelphian.
Right.
Who spends a lot of time, or did spend a lot of time, in Delaware. You're talking about encouraging interaction thousands of miles away in the Middle East.
Yeah, that's a great question.
So how did you get it done? What was the answer?
So the first cohort that we got together, fortunately, there was a church in Wilmington, Delaware, Westminster Presbyterian Church, that is very involved in Middle East peacemaking, both in Israel and in Palestine, in the West Bank, and they had connections to some of the Arab schools in Israel, and particularly this one Arab village. So that was the first thing. The second thing we needed to do was find a Jewish partner school, and fortunately, one of the main administrators at this Arab school was a guy by the name of Michael Shahur, who kind of knows everybody. It's like one of these guys that like, oh yeah, I can get you that, I can get you this, I can get you. And his whole mission in life is shared society, is reconciliation. So he knew somebody at this Jewish school in Haifa, and he helped pave the way for, and helps today pave the way for other schools to come into the project, both within, in the Arab community and the Jewish community in Israel.
Well, how many schools have been involved?
We have had as many as 6. COVID was a real killer. We lost 3 schools during COVID. We were back up to 4. We lost a school during the war. Currently, we have 3 schools. And we have those 3 schools is 150 kids, which is a pretty good percentage of students.
Is the goal to continue to grow?
Yeah, the goal is to really continue to grow. And since 2019, we've been working in the West Bank. And that's a different formula and a different mindset, but with the same goal. So part of the issue is that Israeli society is complicated. Within the society itself, there's an Arab Jewish component,
right?
And right outside of Israel, as we know, there's a war raging in Gaza, and there's major conflicts happening in the West Bank. All land connected to Israel itself.
Right. I want to talk about the impact of the war, but I want to understand. I think you said it cost about $40,000 to get
for instruments,
a steel band set
yes.
to Israel.
Yes,
and that's a certain number of drums, and that's the minimum required
yes.
to have a band. Okay, how many sets of drums do you currently have?
There's 4. There's 4 sets.
Okay, how do you raise the money to pay for these sets?
So the first 2 sets were private donations. We held some fundraisers. We had some people write some nice checks. The third set that we got was through a USAID grant from the U.S. government. We wrote a grant for $150,000 to expand. They liked our program, and in that grant was $40,000 to buy a set of steel drums. And the 4th set we got, it was also private donations. We're in the process of writing a grant now to expand even further because we feel it's really necessary right now. But I would say 90% of our funding is private donations, like somebody writes a $100 check or,
If somebody wants to contribute and understands the importance of promoting shared experiences in the Middle East and how expensive it is to provide the steel drums that provide the basis for that important interaction, how do they go about getting you a contribution?
So peacedrumsproject.org. It's all one word, peacedrums, capital, project.org.
Okay.
Type that in, our site comes up. Everything that you would want to know about an organization is on that site.
Right. Now, your original goal, the shared experience between individuals who don't have many, if any, shared experiences.
Yes.
How has that changed since October 7, 2023, since the war in Gaza, since the expansion of the war into Lebanon and Yemen with Iranian implications. All of that has happened, is happening as we are speaking. And your organization probably has had to adapt to that reality in some way. And I would understand if it's been impacted by the war. Tell us what's happened.
I would say the bigger impact, I know this sounds really weird, but the bigger impact was COVID. And I'll tell you why. During COVID, Israel locked down like crazy. So kids were in their rooms, like by themselves. Like learning remote, which no one learned remotely. School was a joke, but it was. And when the war happened, the first shock of the war, the first shock of October 7th, and then the subsequent war, school shut down. So Israeli society shut down. And the kids were like, we're not going through this again. We're not staying in our rooms. And what happened to our program grew because we were the only ones doing anything outside of school. Like any after school program was canceled. Like they were afraid to be outside. And our program actually grew. And that to me spoke to and I don't want to say kids are resilient because I really don't like that comment, but it spoke to me to the desire of kids to not live in fear and to actually let's continue to play music. And when people found out, oh, there's this program going on, can I join? It actually expanded. And as I mentioned at the top, there's conflict zone, there's art making in conflict zones all over the world. And, what we're doing is making art. We're doing it with music and we're doing it with kids. And it's very important for young people to have an experience like this where they're learning, they're using different portions of their brain to learn about music, to learn about art, to learn about performance, and subsequently to learn about the other. So it has been impacted because there's more fear. Some of the communities that we were in decided to opt out because the Jewish community didn't want to interact with the Arab community didn't want to interact with the Jewish community. So, but outside of that, we grew anyway. And my feeling is, with hopefully a ceasefire that's coming soon, our program will really take off because as society sort of normalizes, if it ever does, there's going to be more call for programs where kids get together and play music.
What do you say to people who might say to you, or at least might be thinking, that given the tinderbox that is the Middle East and all of the conflict, that perhaps some of the larger goals here, I know it's about a shared experience and probably nothing more, but if there is a larger goal here, that you're wasting your time. What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, you're wasting your time if you don't believe in the future of children, right? Like there's a lot of people who think that life begins at 22 years old. And it's like, okay, now you're out of college. Let's get on with the world. Well, by the time you get to be 22 years old, you are formed as a human being. There's few and far humans that break out of their mold from 22 years old in their view of the world, unless something happens. So my feeling is, let me connect kids who are 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. And because we saw with our first cohort, like they're still in touch with one another. The Arab kids and Jewish kids that were in that first cohort, they're quicker to forgive, right? Like I was in touch with a number of them after October 7th, and it was, beyond the shell shock, they were just quicker to see the other side, which is a lot different than saying, this happened, we're going to bomb you into oblivion, or we're going to bomb you into oblivion. And so if they think we're trying to create world peace, we're not. If they think that we're trying to change the minds of young people, or at least enlighten the minds of young people, 100% we are. And that's the mission.
You hinted at it, but give us some more examples of interaction, because that's very heartening. You get these kids, these young adults, to play in a ensemble or band together. These people have no interaction outside of this. What do you then see happening that gives you some hope?
Well, I mean, I could tell you what I saw happening. The reason it's difficult to say what I see happening is because we've had 3 major hits to this program. The first was COVID, which everyone just went to their corners, even though we held constant Zoom between all of our students, Zoom sessions, but that's Zoom. The other thing was there were terrible riots in May of 2021 in Israel, in the Arab and Jewish community. And that was the first time I saw our Jewish and Arab students, because we had to suspend our classes, that's the first time I heard them say to one another, I really miss you. I really miss you. I miss playing music with you. I can't wait to get back. I hate the fact that we can't make music together because of this situation.
Where were they saying this? On social media?
No, on Zoom. We were holding Zoom.
I see.
Yeah, sorry. We were holding Zoom sessions. And then the third hit, of course, is the war. So just when like things were normalizing, then things would happen. I'm really curious to see how this is going to play out in the next 6 months to a year. I'm hoping if there's no ceasefire, if the ceasefire doesn't happen, then we're kind of siloed. I mean, the kids have gotten together. They have played music together. They haven't shared holidays together the way they did in the first cohort, relatively peaceful period between like 2014 and 2020.
What do you mean shared holidays?
So the Jewish kids would go to the Arab kids' house for a Christian or Muslim holiday. The Muslim or Christian kids would come to a Jewish kid's house for Hanukkah or Passover. And that happened, not with everybody, but it happened with enough to where it was pretty incredible to sort of see that.
You know, out of curiosity, I understand the kids' interactions. You've described them beautifully. What about their parents? Because that would seem to me to be a harder nut to crack. Did you see any evidence of interaction between their parents?
For sure, and particularly when we did tours, right? When we did tours and parents came on tours, you know, they were pals on tours. They were the band parents on tours and the marching band competition. But they were the parents don't let their kids play if they didn't believe that there was some other reality, right? So right away they're a little bit more prone to see what else is happening rather than you know, there are parents that say, no way would I ever send my kids to visit an Arab community. This is within Israel. We're not even talking about the West Bank. We're not even talking about cross-border, which is another aspect of peace drums. But within Israel itself, there's more Jewish families now that are say, I want nothing to do with the Arab community whatsoever, which is really tragic.
Right.
On so many levels.
Well, what do you think is going to happen? Let's assume for a moment that there is a peace.
Or a ceasefire.
At some point, there's got I should restate that there's a ceasefire. What do you hope to see happening? What do you project?
Well, I think as I mentioned, there's like 100 other groups in this region that are doing projects like ours, like not music, but some use tech, some use writing, some, there's all sorts of, and these conversations go on all the time where they're trying to see what the future looks like. No one really knows, but I think what comes out is that if we don't believe in our mission, stop doing it, because you can't fool people, right? And so like some people's mission is we can bring Arab and Jewish communities together through through tech, through and through entrepreneurship, et cetera, and that's great. My mission is it's the kids, it's the 10-year-old. If I could go younger, I would, but I haven't found any grants for under 10 years old. But it's the 10-year-olds and up through high school. If you have a kid who's 10 and goes through the program and goes to high school, goes through high school, and our teacher who's teaching steel drums in Israel now is such a person. He was an Arab Christian kid that started at 10 years old. He's now 21 and he's teaching, he's one of our main teachers. If you have those kids, they're going to be different adults. And that's really the only thing I can hope for. I mean, the crushing reality of the war is one thing, but if anybody has children or grandchildren, you understand that that's the hope, not the current situation.
Right. Why the West Bank? That seems like another very difficult nut to crack.
The West Bank is very important to the future of Israel, both in its existence and its diminishment, because of the settler situation, because there's 3.5 million Palestinians that live in the West Bank. And I don't want to get into a political discussion as to why it exists and what's right and what's wrong, but there are children that live there as well.
Right.
And if I believe that there's a future in the Middle East for people to live in harmony, I want to work with the kids in the West Bank. And there are people in the West Bank that want to work across the border as well. And the easiest way to do it is to have a group of kids that are learning the same thing in one community and the same thing in the other community. So when you can get them together, you're not introducing them to anything that they don't already know. And right away, they're playing music together. They're not even have time to go, my name is Abdul, or my name is David. Oh, you're Jewish. It's like you get together, let's play music, go.
And have you actually?
Not yet. Because we've had this war, and we were about to have a huge music festival at the Dead Sea, and the war broke out. But it is in the plans, and it is in the works, and it is something that we're going to eventually do, maybe as soon as later in 2025.
Right, so you're not deterred.
I'm not deterred.
You're not giving up.
No,
you have a strong sense of resolve, and you're going to continue with what you're doing.
For sure. And it's super fun, by the way, to teach, to go into the West Bank as an American Jew, and they know I'm Yehudi, they know I'm Jewish, to go and teach kids and have kids hug you and have their parents hug you because you're bringing them music is an experience that everyone should experience. That, they know my background. I'm not hiding the fact that I'm Jewish. I'm not hiding the fact that I'm American. But I'm bringing them this opportunity to play music together, and it's amazing. It's amazing. I miss it so much.
Well, Harvey, you do remarkable work. And we're very grateful that you do it. And again, to our viewers, this is the kind of organization that you really want to support. We're going to put up the name of the website. Please go on there and consider making a contribution. And I thank you for being with us during this episode of The Leading Question. Remember, stay informed and do not hesitate to ask that leading question. See you next time.
We are the generation of tomorrow, so it's great to be here and make a piece.